Greetings and welcome to Let's Talk About It, where we explore the people, ideas, and experiences that inform, inspire, and connect us. I'm your host, Stacey Hartwell. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It.
Today, we're taking a journey that goes far beyond passports and plane tickets. It's a journey that expands our understanding of the world, deepens our appreciation of other cultures, and perhaps most importantly, helps us discover something new about ourselves. For many of us, travel is something we squeeze into our schedules after we've met everyone else's needs and expectations. But what if travel isn't simply a luxury at all or a reward for a job well done? What if it's one of the most powerful investments we can make in our well-being, our confidence, and even our sense of purpose? In today's segment, we're talking with licensed psychologist and certified travel coach, Dr. Lisa Pittman, who believes that intentional travel can change not just where we go, but who we become. Dr. Pittman, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me, Stacey. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, let's begin with the basics. Most people know what a travel agent does, and they know what a psychologist does,
Right.
but a travel coach is something many viewers may be hearing about for the first time.
Right.
What is a travel coach, and how is travel coaching different from simply planning a vacation or working with a psychologist?
That's a really great question, and I'm happy to be able to provide some insights around that. So, as a psychologist, my objective typically is to take a person who comes to me with what we call a deficit. So, it's a place that they are in their lives and they want to enhance themselves to get to a place where they feel like they are working towards optimal functioning, and a place that and being able to do that, do that in a way that's sustainable. As a travel coach, what I do is I meet people who are already on their way to optimal functioning, may be at optimal functioning, and want to find other ways to enhance their sense of self and their sense of functioning and well-being. And so what I do as a travel coach is work with them where they are, help them identify what their needs are in terms of what they want to do for travel, such as how do you want to feel before your trip, on your trip, and how do you want to feel when you return from your trip? Mostly it's while you're there and when you get back. And then I help them identify experiences that they can then have that would allow them to meet those objectives of how they want to feel. So for example, if somebody says, I want to feel relaxed, I help them understand, okay, so what does that mean by feeling relaxed? How will you know if you feel relaxed? And then what are the activities that would allow you to get to a place of relaxation? And then once we identify those activities and the experiences that they want to have, because it may not actually be activities, it could be, I want to find a beach and this is the kind of beach I'm looking for. We then look at destinations that would be a good fit for those experiences. And then I pass them on to a travel advisor or a travel agent, because I do not book travel. So that's what distinguishes me from a travel advisor, is that I don't book the travel. And so I would pass them along to somebody, or refer them, I should say, to somebody who could help them book the travel.
Yeah, so you focus not on the logistics necessarily, but on the experience.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So now you're also a licensed psychologist.
Yes.
How did your work helping people understand themselves naturally evolve into helping them use travel as a tool for well-being?
A lot of work that I do with individuals is about self-care. And self-care is important to everybody and for everybody. And people often don't give themselves permission or give themselves the space to actually be able to take care of themselves in the ways that will truly enhance their well-being. And so because I come from that perspective anyway of helping people, as I said earlier, get to optimal functioning, part of optimal functioning is, what do you do for yourself? How do you meet your own needs so that you can then maintain that on your own without a lot of outside support, from a professional, at least? You use your supports in your support network. And so naturally that lends itself to, what does self-care mean and how do people meet those needs? As a person who also has my own needs, travel has been a method by which, or through which, I have been able to engage in self-care. And so part of my objective for myself is when I set intentions for my own travel, I'm looking at ways that I can enhance my experience that I can bring back with me and then help me be able to continue to help others. And so it's a natural fit for me to take something I'm really passionate about, which is the travel, and something that gives me a nice base of skills that help people feel comfortable working through some things that get in the way of travel. Putting them together as a travel coach really helps. It's a reflection of those two things.
Well, I've been reading some of your feedback and you have a very robust following. So congratulations on that
Thank you.
point.
Thank you.
So, share a little bit about your philosophy. You've said something that really caught my attention. You said, travel isn't about escaping your life, it's about returning to it differently. What do you mean by that?
Well, every experience that we have affects us in some way. We are, whether it's something locally, even like a new food that we try, a new person that we meet, it all impacts us in some way, shape, or form. And when you travel, it's hard to not be affected by what you're experiencing, whether that's domestic travel or international travel. I know that for myself, anywhere I go, every experience I have makes an imprint on me. And I bring that back with me and I absorb it. And even if it's not obvious to other people what that has done for me, it still allows me to show up in a way that allows me to be present with the people around me, and but it allows me to have a perspective that may have shifted ever so slightly, but still makes me a person who's slightly different than I was when I went. Again, it's not a drastic change. And the difference could be, oh, I'm just more aware, or oh, I'm more rested, or oh, I had some really great food. And now I am really ready to lean back into what it means to be healthy and to, not that good food is bad, but allows me to be healthy. And, just other ways in which that imprint has made a difference. And so in that respect, when you come back, you have been impacted by what you experienced, and that's how you are a different person when you return.
Anything in moderation is good.
Agreed, 100%.
That's on the food point.
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes,
anyway, your mother had a
yes,
profound influence on the way you think
yes,
about time, purpose,
mhm,
and travel. Would you
yes,
share that story with us?
sure. So my mother was a very impactful person in my life. When you talk about imprints, your parents are usually the first people that make that imprint on you. And I had a very good relationship with her, and she was a very strong supporter of everything that I did and everything that my siblings did. Unfortunately, she died early. She had cancer and she died before she turned 60.
I'm
And
sorry.
that's something that has, thank you. And that's something that has always, obviously, I've always been aware of that and has stuck with me. And as I approached my 50s, because she died in her 50s, I became more acutely aware of what that meant for me, and being very intentional about how I spend my life and taking care of my health and all of that. So because I recently entered the decade that was her last decade, it has become all that much more important for me to be intentional about how I spend my time, who I have in my life, and be able to maximize the experience that I have on Earth. One story that always stands out for me is she passed away a few months before I graduated from college. So she knew I was going to grad school, because you have to do all the grad school applications early. And I remember telling her that I was probably just going to stop at a master's degree because I didn't want to do a dissertation. And she said to me, "Don't let your fear of doing a dissertation get in the way of what you want to do with your life." And so I know not everybody gets a master's degree or a PhD, but the point there is that she's told me it's okay to push through the fear, and that fear is part of what helps us grow. And getting on the other side of that is worth it. So you figure out how to make it through. And so that's a lesson that I have a niece and nephew, and I talk with them about the same thing. And with my clients, both therapy and coaching clients, I really help them identify what's getting in the way of the fear and how can you push through that.
Well, I'm so glad that your mother established that legacy and that you're passing it on to your nieces and nephews and others. Well, it
Yes.
certainly is an inspirational story.
Thank you.
Dr. Pittman,
Mhm.
I'm dating myself here, forgive me.
No
I
problem.
began traveling the world before the internet existed,
Mhm.
when experiencing another culture meant actually being there.
Mhm.
Today, technology allows us to see almost every corner of the globe without ever leaving home. We can watch videos, take virtual tours, and even have conversations with people thousands of miles away. Yet you've devoted your career to helping people experience the world in person.
True.
What happens to us, mind, body, and spirit, When we step into another culture that simply can't be replicated through a screen.
Yeah, that's a really important question, and I appreciate you bringing that to light because we do live in a world where we can see anything we want to see in a nanosecond, essentially. There's absolutely nothing wrong with living vicariously through other people. I have a lot of people who do that with me. You know, um, I have a blog and I have a website, and so ultimately, what I would say is seeing it on a screen is one dimensional. Seeing it in person is three-dimensional, but could be four-dimensional. And what I mean by that is when you're there, you're seeing it with all of your senses, you're experiencing it. And the fourth dimension, from my perspective, is you're bringing it back with you. It's back to that question you asked earlier about how does it change a person? You come back and you're changed, and you bring it back with you. And then the other part of that, along with bringing it back, is that it settles in, and there's a level that of understanding that you have about yourself that you might not have had before you left. So what allows for all that to happen is connection. You can connect to the location by being there in person in a way that you cannot connect on a screen. And again, nothing wrong with looking at it on the screen, but it's such a different experience when you can connect in person, because that's what allows you to bring it back for you and allows you to then incorporate that into what life looks like for you thereafter.
And you know what I think about? I think about it as like a kiss. What's the
Ah,
difference between a real kiss and
ah,
just, like that's blowing a kiss?
uh-huh.
Being
Right.
there and experiencing a kiss it
Yes,
just impacts you so much more gratefully.
it
Just
really
to,
does.
to romanticize travel. But anyway,
Right, right.
so you work primarily with Black professional women.
Correct.
What are some of the unique pressures they face that make intentional travel more than a luxury, but an important form of self-care?
Well, as you likely know, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but in my experience, Black women, there's a huge amount of expectation that's placed on us, and that we place on ourselves. Many of us feel like we have this obligation to take care of many people around us, whether that's taking care of our own children, our parents, our grandparents, aunts and uncles, and so on. And so there's that creates a level of stress. Even good stress is stressful. I think people forget that good stress is stressful. And even obligatory stress is stressful. So you have that level of stress. And then for Black professional women, many of them are working, either they're working for somebody else or for themselves. And so there's another layer of stress that they are experiencing. And in those places, whether they're working for somebody else or not, there's an additional expectation that go above and beyond in order to be seen as equal. And so that adds a layer of stress for them in the workplace. And so, as we all know, stress affects our bodies and our bodies start to break down. And so, if there is no vehicle through which a person has identified for themselves how to engage in self care so that they can manage the stress that they experience and minimize the long term negative impacts of that stress, then that becomes problematic. And so that's where, for me at least, and for people I work with, travel becomes one of the conduit for managing that stress, and it becomes a method of self-care. And as a result, it's important to make that investment because it becomes prevention, because you're trying to take care of yourself in the process, and prevention is usually less expensive than intervention, because the body breaking down suggests that there are more doctor's visits and that there are more time away from work, which could sometimes lead to less money made, and then that becomes more expensive. So making that investment in self as on the prevention side can help with enhanced livelihood and well-being in the long run.
Well, that's such a good point, to be proactive about this and see it as a tool really to prevent long-term and sustained injury to
Exactly.
oneself. So that it really is a smart approach. So tell me this. One fa phrase you use really resonates with me. You say your work isn't about convincing women to travel, it's about helping them give themselves permission. Why is permission such an important part of the conversation?
Mhm. Well, if we go back to this obligation that I mentioned as it relates to Black women and the expectations placed on them, it often comes with a feeling that you don't have a choice, that the choice is made for you, that you must do this, this, and this. You must take care of these people in these situations. And giving yourself permission suggests that you have a choice and that you are choosing you. And in order to do, and it can be hard because there's a feeling of selfishness and there's a feeling of guilt and a lot that comes with that. And so it's important to be able to say to yourself, identify your needs and say to yourself, you know what, this is important for me and I'm choosing me, even if that makes other people uncomfortable, sorry.
Very important points, Doctor. Hey, up next, we'll talk about one question Dr. Pittman asks every client before she ever recommends a destination. It's a question that has less to do with where you want to go and everything to do with who you hope to become. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we talked about overcoming the barriers that often keep us from exploring the world. Now we're going to explore what happens when travel becomes a catalyst for personal transformation. Dr. Lisa,
Yes.
when someone comes to you, you don't begin by asking, where do you want to go?
No.
Instead, you ask, what do you want to become when you come home? Why do you start there?
Well, as I talked about earlier, as far as a travel advisor versus a travel coach, you mentioned logistics. And the way I look at it is that my role as a travel coach is to help the person focus on the journey, and the travel agent or the travel advisor helps them with the destination. So when it's a journey, who you want to become is the process of identifying, as I said earlier, what is it, how do you want to feel while you're traveling? And how do you want to feel when you get back? And ultimately, how will you know that you have met that objective? How will you know if you feel more relaxed, for example? How will you know if you feel more grounded? And so helping people identify what they want to experience, how they want to experience that on the back end allows us to then work from the front end and identify, okay, so what's important to you? What are the values that you have? What are your strengths? And how do we identify how that fits in to how you want to feel? And then from there, we go on to the experiences and such. So it goes back to who are you becoming along the way, and how do we make sure that we're hitting those milestones that you're wanting to reach, or some of those needs, how are we making sure those needs are met along the way?
Well, I think that's very smart for a practitioner to really establish a baseline with their clientele. So that
Yep.
makes sense that you start there, and you also use a really cool tool, your
Mhm.
travel identity questionnaire.
Absolutely.
How does that get you closer to the mark?
So I came up with this idea because as a psychologist, there are questionnaires about everything, it seems like. And identity is something that I use quite often in my work as a therapist as well. And it occurred to me that there must be something to do with it seems to me like everybody has their own travel identity. And so the more I thought about it, the more research I did about it, I couldn't find anything that actually measured travel identity. So what I did was I talked with several other people that I know who travel as well, and they are from all walks of life and have different levels of travel, and got some feedback about how would you identify what kind of traveler you are. And so from that, the long story short is that I put together this questionnaire, and what it does, it allows people to answer, I think it's eight, I haven't looked at it in a while, about 8 questions, 8 to 10 questions, to be able to identify to what extent they identify as a traveler. It's different from a profession. Like, how do you identify as a professional versus how do you identify as an athlete? When I was in grad school, my dissertation was on athletic identity. And so it was a natural fit for me to switch. I haven't been an athlete for a long time, but I've been a traveler for a long time. So it was natural for me to switch to travel identity. And it gives people just a fun way to identify how they would characterize themselves in terms of their comfort with travel.
So that's a really important tool, a important aspect of really being able to, like I said before, establish a baseline with your clientele.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
to answer your question, I realized I didn't answer your question as soon as you said that. So that's the tool, and it establishes a baseline. It helps me know what kind of approach I need to at least start with, and then allows me to identify the extent to which this person might need my services, and how I can help them best use my services so that they can get what they need from those services.
Well, if anyone wants to play around with that tool, it's available on your website.
It
So I
is.
would encourage people to visit there, and we'll
Yes.
give you all those details toward the end of this conversation about
Great.
how you can access the tool. So, Doctor,
Mhm.
travel has a way of surprising us.
Yes.
After visiting more than 114 countries, was there ever a moment when you realized you weren't just discovering a new place, you were discovering something new about yourself? Tell us that story and how it continues to shape the way you help others through intentional travel.
Yeah. So one thing that some people don't know about me is that I used to live in Asia. And so when I lived in Singapore, that's living, not traveling, but I did travel while I was there. But that's one of the most obvious places where I noticed how being away from home in a foreign country really impacted me because it wasn't just going for a couple of days and coming back. And what was really impactful was recognizing assumptions that people made about me. They made about me as an American. They made them about me as a Black American, and they made them about me as a Black woman, a Black female American, a woman who, a Black woman who's from the U.S. And I found myself having to be really in tune with me and being true to myself while I debunked some of the myths that they have or some of the stereotypes, while also embracing what that meant to still be authentically me and help others understand how to interact with me. I am an ambassador of one. Like I am one person, I represent me. So I don't represent everybody else. However, that can be just as powerful as if I was a person who wasn't trying to represent everybody else. So the way that that impacted me was it allowed me to understand what it's like to be somewhere else and have to be true to myself while also helping them help learning about their culture and understanding where their biases came from or their assumptions came from. And when I work with individuals now, some of them have assumptions about places that they're considering going. And there are people who may be afraid to go places because of what they've heard in the news or because of, what they've seen on videos and social media. And so having been in some of those places that some of these individuals want to go, while also recognizing how important it is to be true to myself and know what's important to me in my experiences really leads to the intention behind travel and understanding what I want, what the individual I'm working with wants to get from their travel and making sure they do it as safely as possible.
You mentioned a good point about that you're an ambassador of one.
Mhm.
And that in its way can be kind of cathartic for people because it really helps you to focus on, who you are and who you want to represent. So
Right.
how that can be a part of the process too, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's not saying, and I want to make sure it's clear that I'm not saying you have to be somebody else. What I am saying is that we are multi-layered people. We are not just, we talk about code switching, and the reality is it's not even necessarily code switching. It's about digging deeper into other layers that allow us to be curious, that allow us to be vulnerable, that allow us to face fears, as I said earlier about the fears that I had going to grad school. So it truly is about when you're an ambassador of one, you are representing you. And the closer you feel, the more connected you feel to yourself in those situations, the more you can connect with others because you have a level of confidence that allows you to do that.
About that ambassador of one, which is one of my phobias about traveling, is like,
Mm.
do you do only single people in your practice or do you do groups?
So I have multiple different options that people can access. So I primarily do one-to-one. So one person who's traveling, and then I work with them individually. There are times where I work with two people who are traveling together. So if whether they're a couple or friends or however that comes about. So that's typically what I end up doing is one-to-one or two-to-one. But then I do have opportunities available for if more than one or two people want to work together, then I am able to work with groups of people. Usually not more than three or four, but I usually am able to do that if it's in a group, if it's in a coaching session, not on a group trip. There are opportunities sometimes if somebody is running a group tour where I may be asked to do group coaching on their group trip, and that's a little different. So that could be maybe a slightly bigger group. But when you go to my website, you will likely see the one-to-one and the two-to-one, and then I can definitely adjust that for individuals who want to meet, for groups that might want to have a session together.
I think it would be a great opportunity for team building and executives in a corporate
Mhm.
setting,
It could be. True.
because you get to know people when you travel.
That is true. Very true. Yes.
So curious, do you ever travel with your clients?
Not yet. I have not done so
Okay.
yet. No, I mostly will help set them up for successful travel. And so far, I have not traveled with anybody directly. My plan is in the next year or so to do group trips, and that will be those individuals will be essentially clients as well. But I'm not doing that yet. So stay tuned for information about that.
Cool. If someone watching today has spent years putting everyone else's needs ahead of their own, what's the one thing you hope they take away from our conversation?
Well, I would certainly hope that people would be willing to at least consider putting themselves first, prioritizing themselves, giving themselves permission to prioritize themselves. All that kind of goes together. And if there is any kind of, ooh, I don't know if I can do that, ask yourself what that's about. Like, what is getting in the way? So identifying what potentially is getting in the way of them prioritizing themselves. So, like I said, all that goes together. The second part of that is identify one person that can support you in prioritizing yourself. It doesn't matter who it is. It just has to be somebody who's willing to be your cheerleader in the corner. I'm very lucky and blessed to have several people in my corner who support me in my travel and the things that I do. And it allows me to feel, not that I necessarily need the validation, but it's nice to have that extra validation to say, good for you, you're doing it. And, you know, if people can give themselves permission to consider the possibility and then have somebody in their corner, I think that would be really important. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be travel. It could be whatever those needs are that need to be met. It doesn't have to be travel, but identify what that is and then be willing to try that and have somebody support you if you need it.
I've had the privilege of traveling quite a bit myself. In fact, the only thing still on my bucket list is seeing the Aurora Borealis in Norway.
Mhm.
One thing that has always surprised me is how much we have in common, regardless of where we live. We
Right.
love our families.
Mhm.
We celebrate life's milestones, we laugh, we grieve, and we all hope for something better for the people we love. You've traveled again to more than 114 countries.
Mhm.
After experiencing so many different cultures, what's the one thing you've learned about people that surprised you? And what has traveling the world taught you about what it means to be human?
Mhm. I would say one thing that surprises me or that has surprised me is how curious people are about US culture in particular, and about the rest of the world as well. When I travel, I go for the purpose of learning about other cultures, and I find myself answering almost as many questions about my own culture as I do about learning about theirs. And what that has shown me is that the curiosity is one that is usually pretty respectful.
Mhm.
And what I've learned about human beings is that most human beings are pretty respectful and they're pretty kind.
Cool.
And I quite appreciate the kindness that I've experienced and the amount of respect that I've experienced from people around the world. And that's something that I would definitely keep with me and take with me.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, if you'd like to learn more about intentional travel and Dr. Pittman's coaching services, visit the Travel Doctor, that's DOCTA, LLC.com. All right, so Hans Christian Andersen once wrote, "To travel is to live." Today, Dr. Pittman challenged us to think even more deeply, not simply about where we travel, about who we become along the way. That's all we have time for today, Dr. Pittman. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for reminding us that the most meaningful journeys are often the ones that transform us from within. Thank you for spending time with us. Again, my name is Stacey Hartwell, wishing you safe travels, and until next time, travel with purpose. Bon voyage.
I know you're going through a lot. I wonder if you know that we can get help. Let's see how far we can go. Love, your mind.